And we are back with another Nittany Lion on the Baschamania podcast. I am your host, Justin Bash. And whether you're driving your car, getting a workout in, walking around, whatever you're doing, thank you for tuning in to the episode. Today's guest is another one of those guests that I believe most wrestling fans want to hear more of and know more of. Nick Lee, who's a two-time All-American and currently qualified for the Olympic trials in April. He's a hard-working guy. He's going to attack his opponent. He's going to put points on the board, and he's never going to give up. And he's not on social media much. He just recently made an Instagram. Aside from that, he doesn't really have social media. And when you're not active on social media and other channels of media, your story isn't out there. And there's such a desire for so many wrestling fans to know these athletes more. So I'm really excited to have Nick on the show today. I think it's going to be one a lot of you guys are going to love. So if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. If you enjoy this episode, leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And without further ado, let's dive in.
It's Baschamania! Let me tell you something, brother. He gave us everything he had in him tonight. What you gonna do when Baschamania runs wild on? Oh, it's gonna be a good one. And business just picked up here on the podcast. Oh, yeah.
Nick Lee, how you doing, man?
Good, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yesterday's match was a thriller. Thank you for that. As a wrestling fan, those are always fun matches to watch.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Rutgers came ready to roll, so that was good.
Yeah, they did. So that was my wife came running in. She was in the kitchen and she heard my excitement. So she came running in. She had to watch the rest of the match. She's like, "Wow!" She's so new to wrestling, so it's so fun to watch her get into it and see like where that new fandom comes from. So cool, man. Well, listen, I'm pumped to kind of share the Nick Lee story. You know, as I kind of prefaced on the beginning when I did the intro for the show, it's like, you're one of those quiet, head down kind of guys that just puts in the work. You just joined Instagram, but before that, there's kind of no social media. And, you know, anytime you have somebody who's really good at something, you have people who want to know so much more. So let's go back to the beginning. Tell me, like, how did you get started in wrestling?
So it's a funny story. We in my town, the only sport that you can play before second grade was wrestling. Otherwise,
interesting.
You had to wait second grade, and they had football and stuff like that. So I came home with a flyer one day from school, and wrestling was big around my area. Well, for Indiana, you know, Indiana didn't have a lot of wrestling, but you know, where it's big, it's big. So I came home with a flyer, said, "Hey, I want to wrestle," and so I just got into it that way. So I started in kindergarten, and you know, from that point on, it's just been kind of my sport. You know, I experimented with some other sports. I played basketball for half a season.
Because of your height, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think I was unguarded my entire basketball career, so I never scored a point. But I did some Little League football. I did like Taekwondo, but you know, wrestling was always the one that just kind of that I enjoyed the most. And, you know, it's one of those sports too, where whenever you're a kid, you know, you're pretty much always going to get mat time, right? You know, on the football team, it's like, there's only 11 guys out there on the field. So, you know, sometimes it's hard to get play time, and, you know, basketball, the same thing. So wrestling, you're always on the mat, you're always wrestling, everyone gets a chance. So, I think that's one of the things that kind of drew me to the sport. So, yeah.
And then how did you continue to get better? I mean, you know, you hear the story so many times, like you started young, and so many, like I always kind of talk about how wrestling, and we'll get into this a little bit in a few minutes, where like as you get older, the talent pool gets not only smaller, but better. And a lot of people kind of die out at different levels, whether it's youth, middle school, high school, college, whatever. How did you continue to do the opposite, right? Instead of dying out, you continued to get better, being a junior cadet national champ, a state champ. Like, how did you continue to get better when you were younger?
Yeah, I think for starters, just, you know, enjoying the sport. And so for me, like, I always loved wrestling. So even while people around me in grade school and stuff were kind of like quitting and stuff, I just continued to wrestle just because I liked it. It didn't matter who I was wrestling. I just enjoyed it. I had 2 brothers that were also wrestling, so that helped, right? So you have 3 brothers, and we're constantly practicing and training together. And then as far as like getting better, I think it's important to get outside of your comfort zone. We traveled a lot. We went to a lot of different wrestling camps. We were exposed to different kinds of wrestling. Exposed to, we went to camps in Ohio, we went to camps in Pennsylvania. We traveled a lot for tournaments as well. So that was, that's a fun part for the kids is, you get travel and it's kind of an adventure for them.
Sure.
So just continuing to enjoy the sport, I think, is the most important. Enjoy learning about the sport. And then, I think, to get better, that's kind of where it starts, right? And know what you're doing it for. You're doing it for fun. And so just kind of remembering that through my career, I remember that I was always having fun, whether I was getting better or if I was getting beat. I was always having fun. So I think that's probably important through a youth career.
And were you good right away, or did it take time to develop and get really good?
Absolutely not. Yeah, I was not good right away. I remember being really bad, actually, whenever I was
And you're still having fun at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. So my whenever I was in first grade, so that was my second year wrestling, my dad was deployed to Afghanistan. So he missed kind of my whole first year of wrestling. And I had my neighbor's boyfriend was a wrestler at like a local high school. And so he kind of like would come like once a week and wrestle around with me and my little brothers. So that's kind of like the perspective that we grew up with wrestling, was like a wrestler in high school. So and I remember it was kind of it's a not a clear memory, but I remember it was kind of like the end of that year. I was wrestling and I lost a match, and at that point I don't know, I was just a kid. I didn't really like care that I had lost the match, and then coach kind of got in my grill and was getting on me about caring about winning and losing. So at that point I started to care a little bit more, I think, about winning and losing. And then, my dad got back from Afghanistan, and him being a military guy, that kind of bring that perspective into the training and stuff. And so I think I finally started to win matches in like 4th grade, something like that. And then,
wow,
from there it was just kind of, a lot of traveling, a lot of wrestling. And then I think probably 6th, 7th grade, I started to kind of break the national scene a little bit.
Yep.
But from my perspective, I never really even noticed that. For me, it was just like the next tournament or the next wrestling camp. I never really like noticed, where I was in relation to the rest of the country, which I'm kind of thankful for. I think that that gets away from us sometimes. So
it's funny because Nolf was just kind of saying the same thing when he was in the podcast. Like, he only wanted to be a champion at what he was currently doing. Like, when he was young, he just wanted to be a high school state champion. Then he wanted to be an NCAA champion. Then once Molnaro made the team, he wanted to be an Olympic champ, right? Like, he's kind of stayed focused. And so I'm curious, when was the kind of what bridged the gap from focusing on not really carrying the national scene, and then you got really good, and then from my understanding, you end up being homeschooled your senior year so you could live in state college and train freestyle, right? So what led to that kind of transition?
I think just that's kind of, it's kind of a personal decision on my part, right?
Sure.
So, once you kind of decide that, hey, I think I want to be the best that I can be, then you start making choices in line with that, right? So I kind of just decided, or I don't know if a choice is the right word. I just wanted to be the best that I could be. So I started, making choices like that kind of were in line with that. And, for me to be the best that I could be, I think, it was time to go to state college and train with, the best guys in the world. So I think just kind of in my head, everyone has things that they want to do. I just decided, I want to be the best that I can be at wrestling. So I just kind of started making choices in line with that. And then, here I am. And just also, though, I think that knowing that that's something that I really enjoy, that's something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy wrestling. And the way that I enjoy wrestling is by being the best I can be and making choices in line with that. So I think just kind of, I just am kind of following, my gut, kind of what I want
Sure.
to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And what led you to Penn State and State College?
That's, I think you'll probably get similar answers from a lot of the guys. For me, it was the people that were here. There's,
Yep.
Obviously we have great facilities and everything, but the coaches here had a huge impact on me. And I would say since I've been here for almost 4 years now, it's like my mindset in a lot of areas is completely flipped. And so the coaches had a huge impact on me, and I think they really whenever I was being recruited, I kind of saw from my conversations with them what this sport could be to me. Right. And what I could be to myself, and so kind of just a larger, bigger mindset looking at life and wrestling. And so the coaches had a huge impact on me. The people here had a huge impact on me. And that's, I think, the final reason why I came to Penn State. Other than it's a great school, great area to live in. And the facilities, obviously, I don't know if you've ever, been in our wrestling. Well, you have been in our wrestling.
Yeah,
it's
I've been
nice.
there a ton, and that's kind of like where I wanted to lead that question, which is I don't compete. I haven't wrestled since high school, and when I walk in that room, I'm so inspired just to be better and to be diligent and master my craft, and it's you get that vibe when you walk in, and there's guys like you and Hall and Chenzo and Nolf and Nickel and Dave and all these guys for so long. There's so much greatness that it motivates you to be better in what you do. What was that like when you enrolled there? Was it, I'm imagining it was encouraging, but I'm also imagining it was kind of overwhelming probably.
It's a little intimidating, right? Because, everyone in the room is literally, at the top of their game and at the top of the game. So it's, for guys, and for me, as a guy that I didn't really pay attention to the national scene a lot. I couldn't have told you, whenever I committed to Penn State, Nico Megaludis was wrestling there. I didn't know what he looked like until I watched the nationals that year. So, awesome. and now me and Nico are buddies, but, so I just I didn't pay attention to it a lot. I was kind of just focused on, improving myself. But then, you get in there and all these guys, they have aspirations to be, Olympic gold medalists, national champions. And that's my aspiration too. But it kind of comes full circle and you're like, okay, I'm actually going to do this. This is actually something that I'm going to do. And so it's kind of, it's an interesting feeling because it really flies by because you're a grade schooler, you're a high school, and you're like, okay, it's the state championship this year. It's, the, Fargo Nationals this year, but it's going to be the national championships.
Right.
That's the ultimate goal, or it's the Olympic championships. And then you get there and it's I'm here now. I'm here now. So it's interesting and you kind of have to keep it all in perspective, but it was a little intimidating at first, but then you get really comfortable knowing that everyone there has the same goals, and it makes it a lot of fun knowing that you're there with people at the top of the game and, you can really be the best that you can be. And that's what's exciting for me in the room is I know that, I don't want to say anything about any other room, but I feel like this is the place for me to be the best that I can be, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And that's, it's interesting because when you go to a school like Penn State, it's not, I don't want to say it's not a fit for everyone because I think everyone can get better there. But I think the more appreciation you have for it, the more you're kind of overwhelmed with that sense of man, I can be so good here. There's so much greatness around me. What was the difference from training at the junior level and high school and all that, and then moving to training at the college level?
Yeah, I mean, the difference for one, if we're talking about just wrestling, is the level of competition that I have every day is incredible. Like I can go in and any day that I want, I can get my butt kicked if I want to,
Right.
So that's probably one of the main differences from going from, high school or junior level to college. And then also at Penn State specifically, just the mindset of where does wrestling fit in your life and where do you fit in wrestling, right? So I would say in high school and, earlier in my life, wrestling, if you're a wrestler and you're pretty good, that takes kind of a dominant role in your life. And there's really no way around that, with sports these days with kids. I mean, if you're good in a sport, that kind of tends to dominate your life and, everything revolves around that. And, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I don't think. But, that kind of dominates your thoughts. And so, coming in and adapting to the mindset here, you kind of begin to realize that wrestling is not who you are, it's what you do, right? So, and then once you understand that, you can decide whether you want to be the best that you can be at wrestling or not. And I found that for me, if wrestling is dominating my thoughts all the time, I'm not the best that I can be. And so I started to realize that, hey, this is what I do. This is not who I am, but I love it. And so I'm going to put everything I have into it. So the mindset for me changed a lot. And getting my butt kicked helps too. I mean, that's a special thing if you can walk into a room and any day and get your butt kicked. So, so I always am thankful to be in the room that I'm in.
And what specifically helps you, transition that mindset and balance? Because you're right, youth kids nowadays, I see some kids that, I don't want to give away who it is if they listen to this podcast, but I see people who have kids and they're just so demanding. And it's almost like, I don't want to say they're living vicariously through their kids, but you can tell just how consuming it is. And, there's a lot of conversations on this podcast about balancing wrestling and life and relationships and school. Was there self-awareness factors or what, coming to Penn State, it helps change your mindset, but what along the path starts to change that perspective? Because you got to have self-awareness. I think there's a lot of guys who can get whooped in practice or can be around great people, but if you're not kind of processing that, I feel like you don't, it's like anything. If you're not grateful for it, you're not going to focus on it more. What helped you to focus more on that and become more self-aware? So you could say, hey, wrestling is not who I am. It's what I do. And what helps to transition your mindset towards that positive perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to start, I'm blessed with a lot of experience around me. So, the coaches, especially Coach Kale, they talk a lot about that. We talk about that all the time. Are we focusing on the outcome, or am I focusing on, being the best I can be? So, having all that experience with that around me really helps. So it's kind of jump-started it, if you will, for me.
Sure.
And then also, one of the things that we talk about and I try to focus on is just whenever I say be the best you can be, that doesn't mean just wrestling, right? That means, school, relationships,
right.
Just life in general. So I think if you're, putting your full effort into everything, if it's worth doing, it's worth putting your full effort into, right? So you kind of have to make, that decision. Is this worth doing? And if it is worth doing, then I'm going to do it the best way it can be done. And do I enjoy doing it? Right. So, wrestling, I wrestle for fun, and that, just to be honest, I wrestle for fun. That's the only reason I do it. If I ever stop having fun wrestling, I'm probably going to stop wrestling just because, I do it for fun. That's what I do it for. Right. There's really no other reason to do it. For me anyway, I understand people that do it for, glory or whatever.
Yep.
That's part of the fun, right? That's part of the fun. Winning is part of the fun. But, losses and stuff, that's also part of the fun. That's kind of your that's kind of the ups and downs of life. You can't have the ups without the downs, right? So just having the people around me that help me put things into perspective, and understanding that the reason why you wrestle, right, is because we do it for fun. And then something someone told me, and it was someone in our room, but you hear it for everyone, is you only need one reason to win or one reason to do anything, and that's because you want to, right? There's infinity reasons to say, I don't want to do this. There's infinity excuses, right? But the only reason you need to do something is because you want to. And so that's kind of a cool thing that I always try to think about, and put that in my head. And just, stay also gratefulness, like just stay grateful for everything that we're doing. So yeah. I mean, it's a weird transition sometimes, especially if wrestling has dominated your thoughts for a lot of your life. But you start to realize, I'm 21 right now. If I'm lucky, I'll have another, 10 years in my wrestling career before my body starts to break down.
Right.
Hopefully longer than that. But, and then you got, 70 years after that to do stuff. So just kind of put it in perspective,
Yeah, and it's so crucial to keep everything in perspective. And I feel like when everybody, myself included, fails from keeping things in perspective, you got to kind of think about the big picture while focusing on the small picture and doing day to day what gets you towards that goal. And I'm curious, you've been so dominant in the sense of every match you're in, you can see the effort, you can see that you're having fun, you're trying to attack, you're trying to put points on the board. What's your perspective and mindset to continue to get better? Like you give it so much effort and you have success. Like you're an All-American as a freshman and a sophomore, fifth in NCAA's, the toughest wrestling tournament arguably in the world. Like how do you continue to level up and say like, okay, I need to continue to get better because I want to be an NCAA champion. Like now I'm an All-American, great, check the box, right? Like I want to be an NCAA champion. How do you continue to level up to say, I know I can do more?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a critical person of myself. So, even in matches where, I've had matches where it's like a second period tech fall and I'm like, okay, I did all this stuff wrong. So let's go in and work on that. Right. So I think just like naturally I criticize myself and I find my own flaws. So, a lot of times for me, the most helpful thing is whenever a coach says, okay, well, this is what you're doing right, so keep doing that. And so that's helped me a lot. And then, obviously last 2 years I've gotten fifth. I got third at the last two Big Ten championships. Like obviously my goal for each of those is to win. Right. So I'm coming out of there not necessarily, happy because I hate losing, but at the same time, I wouldn't go back and change anything because I gave my best effort in each of those tournaments. And so that's fun for me, right? So I gave my best effort. I came up a little short, so boom, next year we're gonna get better for the next time. And after this year and then one more year, my NCAA career will be over. So at that point, it's like, okay, like what's next? And so I try not to fixate myself too much on a material goal, and I try to think more about, okay, like where can I improve for myself here and be the best that I can be, right? Because, I can't be a 4-time national champion now, right?
Right.
I've only got 2 more national championships left. So if that was my goal at the start, I didn't achieve it, what's the point of continuing wrestling? Well, for me, the point is so I can be the best that I can be, and just because I love the sport and that's what I want to do. So I think for me specifically, I try not to fixate so much on the material goal and more on, the personal goals.
And what's like the process of, I say this a lot for people who listen to the show a lot. It's always easy to talk about the past in the sense of like you deal with adversity, you overcome a loss, you deal with something negative. It's so easy to talk about it, but it's so hard in the moment. Like minutes feel like hours when you lose at the NCAA tournament, right? And it's like, man, I worked all year for this, and now I got to wait a whole nother year. Like that time, it feels like I haven't been in that position, but I can imagine like time slows down a bit. what's the process to quickly like get your mind right and not dwell, and to say like, okay, I didn't do this, but I'm going to work towards it again. Like, what's that process to have, on one hand, you have such high expectations for yourself. On the other, it's like, okay, I didn't hit that, but I'm moving on. Like, what's that process like?
So I think it starts with your training, right? So if you are, if you're cutting corners or you're doing things that you should be doing that are not in line with your goals, and then you don't achieve your goal, that's kind of your fallback. Like, okay, well, my excuse is I didn't do these things right? So I think it starts with making sure that you're making the right decisions, making choices that are in line with your goal. And then competition day comes, are you giving full effort, right? So whether I win or lose, I know that I've made decisions in line with my goal, and I know that I'm giving 100% effort towards that goal. So at the end of the day, if I lose, I hate losing, but I don't have anything to be disappointed in myself about because I gave full effort. And so I'm going to wake up the next day and I'm going to be able to go after it again. So just, I think if you have given full effort and you've done everything right, then you have no reason to be disappointed in yourself, right? Maybe you're disappointed with the outcome, which is natural.
Yep.
But, at the end of the day, there's really no reason any of us should be disappointed in ourselves for the outcome of a sporting event, right? As long as you're doing the right things and you're giving full effort in the moment. And I think that's really the full value of an athlete is are they giving their full effort 100% of the time? It's easy to give your full effort, in the last 30 seconds of a wrestling match. We see that all the time. We'll see two guys stand around for 6.5 minutes, and then the last 30 seconds, it's a flurry of activity, right? So, but are you giving your full effort through the entire match? Are you giving your full effort in your training? And at the end of the day, it's really hard to be disappointed in yourself, at the end of a season if you've given 100% effort and really left it all out there on the mat. It's hard to be disappointed in yourself at the end of a season when you do that.
And I imagine too, you have to kind of constantly reevaluate and stay focused on those goals. Like even now, I imagine this year, from talking to a bunch of you guys who are both trying to win an NCAA championship and be an Olympic champion, like you've now, a couple weeks ago or a month now ago, went to senior nationals, qualified for the Olympic trials, and you've kind of starting to give yourself a feel for the senior level. Or how do you balance that with saying, I still have 2 more years of college left, and I want to now be a 2-time NCAA champ, and I also want to continue to get better at the senior level? Is it just that overlap of like, hey, wrestling's wrestling, or do you kind of divide the focus into little buckets and try not to get distracted by having, like, those are big goals. I think just to be an NCAA champion, huge goal. Just to be an Olympic champion, huge goal. Just to be an Olympian, huge goal. Like, how do you balance those different goals?
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of that's tough for guys to do. And I think if you, like I was saying earlier, I think if you focus on that material goal too much, it kind of, you'll confuse yourself in your head.
Sure.
So for me, I understand that all that's out there and that's, the goal, but then I can fit all of that into one goal of being the best that I can be. Because I know the best that I can be is an Olympic champ, a national champ, right? So if I'm constantly working towards that goal, everything else kind of falls in line with that. So that's kind of how I think about it. You kind of, the material is there, but then at the end of the day, if you're the best you can be, that you're going to be there. You're going to get the material goal, right? You're going to be a national champion. You're going to be an Olympic champion. And I think that, kind of in the back of everyone's head, every wrestler, they know, if they lose a match and they're disappointed, it's because like they weren't their best self that day, right? But if you are wrestling at the national championship or you're wrestling at the Olympics, you're there because you believe that the best that you can be is a national champion or an Olympic champion, right? So I try to focus on that more so, and it does take constant reevaluating, right? It's easy, in today's age of social media and the hype, it's easy to let that get away from you and kind of focus on individual matchups or, focus on what place you got or how many points you score. It's easy to do that. So you do constantly have to reevaluate, like, okay, hold on, what am I doing? Before each match for me, I say, hold on, what am I here for? I'm not here to beat that specific guy. I'm not here to score this many points. I'm here to be the best that I can be. And if I'm the best that I can be, then at the end of the day, we're going to be pleased. So it does take a constant reevaluation. You have to remind yourself, but that's part of the fun and that's part of the work, honestly. Yeah.
And when you have the goals, like, it obviously doesn't happen that often, but I guess if you're training to be an NCAA and a world champion, it can, world Olympic champion and an NCAA championship, two kind of separate goals that could happen each year.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself training separately for them, or is it just you want to be the best wrestler you can be and everything else will work out? Like when you have senior level matches, are there specific things you say, okay, I need to get better for the Olympic trials, and these are specific things I need to get better at NCAAs? Like I feel like, especially the weight you're at, the 65 kilo Olympic field and then the 141 pound field at NCAAs, like they're kind of completely separate, right? And I hear both sides of the argument. Like I hear one side of the argument in the conversation, which is, listen, wrestling's wrestling. Like if you get better at wrestling, you can adapt to the styles. But on the other hand, you wrestle completely separate, different fields. Do you kind of train all for one giant field, or how do you approach the differences between NCAA and Folkstyle and then the senior level and freestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a little. This is where I can kind of cop out a little bit because I leave my training to my coaches.
Yeah.
I kind of just do what they say.
Sure.
But at the same time, I do have things in my mind where I'm like, all right, for the freestyle, I need to work on this, and for folk style, I don't necessarily need to worry about that. So I am thinking about that, and you have to think about that because it is a little bit different. And then, like you said, there is the other side of the argument where it's wrestling is wrestling, and I think that's true to an extent. But it's silly to ignore the differences between freestyle and collegiate, right? Silly to ignore that. So you definitely have to just be conscious of rule differences. I can't roll over my back in freestyle. Can't lock my hands in folk style, obviously.
Right.
So it's you have to be conscious of it. But then as far as the training goes, real easy for me. I just do it. I'm told, and then I give 100% effort. And at the end of the day, I'm it's out of my hands. I've given 100% effort, and so I don't have to worry about the training. That's nice for me. I've always thought about training that way. I'm going to let my coach, think about the training, and I'm going to take ownership in it, and that I know the areas that I need to improve on. I know if I need to improve on conditioning. I know that I need to give my full effort, and then at the end of the day, coaches are there for a reason, right? They're there to help guide you. They've done it before. Some of them have done it several times before. Right. Especially in my coaching staff. So sure. I can really lean a lot on them, which is helpful to me.
And have you always had that, I'm not going to call it blind trust because it's earned and deserved, but have you always had that trust in your coaches that it's like, look, I can only be self-aware. I got to trust the process. Like even going back to your early days, like was that important for you to trust your coaches and lean on them? Or was that something that evolved as your wrestling career evolved?
I think a little bit of both, right? I've always been a guy where I if my coach asks me to do something, it's going to get done. And then, also just kind of as my career has progressed, understanding where in the mix of things do I need to assert myself and where do I need to, be exactly on the line that the coach is on. So I think it's evolved a little bit, but I think a good rule of thumb for anyone is if, your coach, the guy who is in charge of training you says for you to do something, it's smart to do it, right? So I'm always going to give full effort in what my coach says. And I think even if my plan is better than my coach's, I would rather go with the coach's plan and give 100% effort. And at the end of the day, I'm going to do better. And I think just for me, that puts my mind in a better place, because I've given 100% effort. I've done what my coach asked. So now all I got to do is go out there and wrestle and have fun. So that's kind of, for me personally, that's where I like my mind to be. I'm sure there's other wrestlers that, you know, would rather have more of a hand in their training. But, you know, for me, I'm a guy that listens to my coach, and I give 100% effort. So.
And I think it's so crucial. And, you know, I've even learned that from wrestling in middle and high school, and how much that's carried over for me and into the business world. Like, I never went to college. I never, you know, I graduated high school. I tried like 4 classes and I was done with the local community college I went to. And, you know, God made it work out. I was able to launch a company a few years later. And I feel like even though I absolutely sucked at wrestling, you take so much from it. Like, you learn so much. The sport it teaches you so much diligence, and you can apply it everywhere in life. Have you, and I don't know if you even have any, but do you have like off the mat aspirations? Is there things you want to do like while you wrestle or post wrestling? Like, I know everybody kind of views it a little bit differently with what they want to do.
Yeah.
Is it just 100% wrestling, or are there other things you want to do too?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff that I do off the mat. I, you know, as a kid, I always, you know, liked reading about history, so I'm a big, you know, history buff. You know, right now in college, I'm studying health policy and administration. So, you know, just things that I'm interested in, I pursue. So if I enjoy it, I'm going to pursue it. And that's not to say that, you know, I'm going to have a long career in health policy and administration. Sure. Whenever I've done wrestling, but, you know, it's something that's interesting to me. So I'm going to pursue it. And, you know, the same with wrestling, I'm having fun doing it. So I'm going to, you know, continue to stick with it. But yeah, I think it's, I do, you know, I have a lot of interests off the mat. Wrestling is one of my interests. I'm going to be honest. I don't usually watch, you know, the Big Ten duels and stuff. I think it's, unless I'm wrestling in it, I think it's pretty boring, but yeah, I do a lot of stuff off that. I mean, I think, you know, that's important, you know, not necessarily, I don't know if I believe in, okay, well, you know, we're going to make sure you're well-rounded, but for me, you know, I'm interested in all these things, and I think it would be dumb not to try to pursue something that I find interesting. So yeah, I do some different things. I study some different things. Bo, Nickel, and Vincenzo are doing this jiu-jitsu thing now, so I'm trying to get into that maybe a little bit with them. Yeah. But we'll kind of see. So, yeah, you know, if I find it interesting, if I find it fun, I'm probably gonna, you know, look into it. So.
I love it. And have you, you know, I can kind of predict the answer, but have you found that wrestling helps you in those off the mat areas too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, wrestling is such a unique sport, right? It's been around for forever. You know, it's something that it's an individual focus, right? So if I have to get better at a single leg, right, there's no one who can pursue that other than me, right? I have my coaches to help me. I have my partners to help me. But if I have to get better at a single leg, I got to go out there and do single legs, right? So same thing in, you know, outside or off the mat is if I'm interested in a subject, you know, the only person that can go pursue that is me, right? You have people to help you. So I think that wrestling has helped me in a way that I am capable of sticking with something and, you know, pursuing things that I find interesting. And, you know, obviously there's self-discipline and stuff too. That's a huge part of wrestling. Sure. So yeah, I don't want to skip over that. I'm sure everyone's talked about that, but it's, yeah, wrestling is, it's my chosen sport, I guess. And so I in enjoying doing that, it's given me perspective on everything that I do, you know.
Totally. For sure, man. So before I let you go here, this is obviously such a big year, 2020. NCAA's coming up, Big Ten's coming up, Olympic trials. Like, what are you most excited for next?
Yeah, I mean, I get excited for every match. So maybe our next duel I'll be excited for.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you know, we got the Nationals coming up. I'm really, really excited. We got some young guys on the team that I'm really pumped for. You know, they've been putting in good work and, you know, they got good energy. So, you know, I'm excited for some of the young guys on the team, see how they're going to do. I'm excited for, our team in general to just kind of finish out the year here. We've been a little beat up, but, the guys are starting to come back. So I think it's going to be, a fun end of the year for us. And then the nice part about this year is, after nationals, we roll right into the summer of wrestling. So we got the Olympics this year. So that's going to be fun too. So just a lot of, exciting stuff coming up.
And what does that mean?
We have a lot of
Sorry, not to cut you off, but with the Olympic trials too being in state college, like how exciting is that?
I mean, that's really exciting, mainly because I get to sleep in my own bed.
That's what everybody says. Taylor's is the same thing. Everybody says that.
Yeah. So I don't mind traveling. I get to see new places.
Yeah.
But sleeping in my own bed, it's hard to beat. So
yeah.
That's going to be nice. And yeah, I mean, we're familiar with the area. I just want to say, it being in state college is going to be great for everyone. Everyone's going to have a fantastic time. It's a great area. I think that people are really going to enjoy it. So at least that's my hope. So it's going to be awesome. Having everyone in, University Park, State College, this is like, for me in my life, this is like the center of wrestling is right around here, coming from Indiana. So
yeah,
it's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of guys that are competitive. So, I'm, even more invested. I've always been a guy that's, I really, enjoy seeing my teammates succeed. So it's exciting for me that we have a lot of guys that are, contenders.
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Nick Lee, thank you for joining the podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, that is all the time we have for today's episode. If you haven't already done so, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star rating review on Apple, and if you're interested in supporting this podcast, Baschamania apparel, stickers, magnets, all that good stuff is dropping this week. I'll probably be sharing more of that on social media, so be sure to be following the podcast at Baschamania pretty much everywhere. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
And the beat goes on.